I'm not a car.
Not
buff.
enough.
I think
I mean, that
someone
was,
would nail it within a
40s.
year or two.
yeah, right?
Probably says, and I just can't read it.
All set?
Whenever you're ready.
Yeah. Let's get going. All right, welcome to the special joint meeting of the Village of Lake Bluff Joint Plan Commission and Zoning Board of Appeals and Historic Preservation Commission on Wednesday evening, November 16th, 2022. Oh, you gave it to me. There we go. Thank you. Yeah, before we get into the agenda, a notice was received by a member of the PCZBA in accordance with village policy, and Member Fisher will be deemed authorized to attend the meeting electronically unless a motion objecting to the member's electronic attendance is made, seconded, and approved by 2/3 of the members of the PCZBA physically present at the meeting. If no such motion is made, then Deb's request to attend the meeting electronically shall be deemed approved. All right. Is there a motion objecting to Member Fisher's electronic attendance?
Maybe we should ask her if she wants to attend.
Of course I do.
Hearing none, then Deb's request to attend shall be deemed approved. So, roll call.
Very good. Yeah, we'll do the members of the Plan Commission first, and this is also a meeting of the Preservation Commission. With that said, Member Miller.
Here.
Member Danley.
Here.
Member Fisher is participating virtually. Member Russell.
Here.
Member Sorensen.
Here.
Member Toll is absent. Chair Peters.
Here.
You have a quorum of the PCZBA. And then for the Historic Preservation Commission, Member Church. Member Minor. Member Liebolt is absent, Member Nickel is absent, and Chair Bergman. Very good. And then as one procedural note, there's a microphone there at the table, and we do appreciate if whoever's talking can, two of them, whoever's talking can just talk into the microphone, especially for Ms. Fisher's benefit.
Yeah, before we get into the essence of the meeting, we still must address non-agenda items and visitors' public comment time. I don't see anybody that's here physically that might want to address the group. Anybody electronically?
No one participating virtually either, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Agenda item number 3, Historic Preservation Policy Workshop. Paul, do you want to take the lead, or Janie or Margaret, however you want to proceed?
I'd like to start by thanking you for. Is this on?
I believe so, yes.
It's glowing yellow. So, I want to thank all of you for agreeing to meet with us this evening. It's great to have us all get together.
Just keep going, Mr. Bergman. We'll take care of
It's
this.
great to have us all get together here and talk about some of the changes that we've been working on. Great to be able to talk to you and spend some time with you talking about all of the changes that we've been thinking about and working on with the Historic Preservation Ordinance. We're trying to fundamentally change how preservation functions in Lake Bluff by, rather than making so many of the preservation rules proscriptive, we're trying to make them an encouraging environment where you can be rewarded for landmarking your house. So rather than paying a penalty for if you landmark your house and then want to do something to it and somebody objects, then you have to come before the commission and go through various problems. We see that it's going to be far simpler and far more encouraging and far more part of the Lake Bluff spirit to invite people to preserve their homes. And most of the people moved here to Lake Bluff, or some of us were born here in Lake Bluff, I have to point out. But we love this community because of the way it looks. And a great part of the way it looks, including the village hall that we're sitting in this evening, is because of all of the beautiful old buildings. So we love the the beautiful old buildings, we love the trees, we love the quaint streets. And so we have the preservation ordinance to try and encourage that. So we're trying to change the ordinance in ways that encourages people to preserve their house. And so over time, we've run into a number of problems. Some of them are financial problems, which we talked about with the Finance Committee, which are part of the memo that you have tonight. And then another part of it is how zoning approaches some of the problems that we have with some of the old houses. So there's the approach of how you view zoning ordinance changes, and then also there's a floor area ratio question that we also would like to address. So I'll sort of stop at that point and see if you have any comments or anything that you'd like to add.
I guess I was a beneficiary of our meeting about a month or so ago, and that was tremendously insightful. So at the conclusion of that meeting, I thought that the general approach that the commission was going forward with was certainly very, very reasonable. It's the first time that our commission's had a chance to look at it as a whole, and so there might be obviously certain questions, but from a policy perspective, certainly seemed reasonable, at least from my personal perspective.
Well, I can give you a little history on the interplay between HPC and zoning. Now, 12 or 14 years ago, the clock seems to tick, there was a proposal to tear down the house at 210 East Center. And the house was deemed to be old, out of date, uncomfortable to live in. It had a brick and rock foundation on it, which was about as porous as just putting the house on a sand bed. And so the house was 110 years old or something like that. The developer bought the house and came to tear the house down. And we went through multiple iterations of what would be a good replacement house. The entire village rose up and said, we don't want to see this house torn down. And in typical Lake Bluff fashion, street signs or yard signs went up all over town, Save 210 and whatnot. And there was the great, wonderful Lake Bluff controversy that we like so much about being in this town. And the developer at one point said, you know, I kind of don't care what I put on this property. It's just simply a transaction to him. And somebody in the board, the conversation went on a little further, and someone said, well, can you just simply replace the house? And he said, I don't mind replacing the house. I can build the same kind of house that's there, only with modern materials and modern amenities. He then, I think another meeting went by, and then he raised the problem that the house has several zoning violations to it. And in order to bring it into code compliance, it has two-story porch on it, porch on the first floor, porch on the second floor. And it has beautiful little 1910 railings on it, which come probably just above your knees. And that doesn't comply with the ADA requirements of handrails being 40 inches tall. The uprights between the rails were spaced in a nice Victorian manner, which is too wide for the ADA requirements, that they be small enough the little kid's head can't slide in there. So that was one of the problems. The other problem was that there was a bay window on the dining room, which was about halfway down the side of the house. The house itself was right on its lot setback line, and the bay window hung into the setback. And so if it comes in the setback, then you get an invitation to your board. So the HPC wrote a letter to the ZBA and said, we would like to save this house. We would like you to look at the zoning variances, and if they're not impossible to agree to, we would like you to agree to them. And the ZBA response was, we've never had another board write to us and ask us that question, and we think we would be very happy to take a very strong look at that. Ultimately, the ZBA at that time agreed and granted the zoning variances. We now have a house when my friends and when my sister and her friends come back to town, they can't tell that that's a replacement house. And so one of our very first failures and one of our very first successes on the HPC board was we lost a historic house, but we were able to replace it with a house that's so close that when people come back to visit, they say, oh yeah, that's Mr. Moe's house. And Mr. Moe was the shop teacher at the grade school, and his wife taught home ec. So there's like generations of people in the town, or used to be generations, that had Mr. Moe or Mrs. Moe for teachers in school. So that's part of the charm of this. So we've had this issue, that's sort of the historical background for you. And so we've had this issue come up again, and we've then heard other stories of people saying, I can only market my old house as a tear down because I can never bring the house into zoning compliance. I live on such a small lot, or in order to fix this house, I have to do so much work to it. I have to expand this, I have to fix that. There isn't enough room to put a bump out on the back so I can have a normal sized kitchen. Or I can't put a two-story bump out on the back so I can have a second floor bathroom. And so we keep seeing that as being an impediment to preservation, an impediment to preserving the streetscape of Lake Bluff. So it seems to us that if at preservation we take a look at, well, what does zoning do and how do they go about doing that? Your requirements, if I understand them, and I'm certain you will correct me where I'm wrong, your requirements are to view a zoning variance in light of some form of a hardship. There has to be some reason for doing that. And so my way of describing that is that you start out by looking at a zoning variance request at no, and then say, now convince me to say yes. And so we're asking you to change that proposition around so that if a house is a historic monument, if the house is a landmark house in Lake Bluff, that you look at it and say, well, yes, we want to work with this homeowner to see if we can grant some of the zoning variances. It's not to say that you're stuck putting all the glass boxes on, on the old houses or, things that are outrageous, but it's, no, we start out by beginning with the concept of working with the homeowners. And the second component of that is the 20% floor ratio relief. There's a lot of houses in town that are maxed out, and they need just a little extra space to make the house more habitable, or to make it economically beneficial to go ahead and remodel a house. So if you want to put a bump out on the back of the house so you can have a nice kitchen on the first floor, fix up the master on the second floor, put a bathroom up there, now suddenly you've modernized the house and it becomes a lot more livable. You have a house, we all have a house at 500 North Avenue, which has a myriad of problems. First off being that it's across its own lot line. It's actually, part of the house is in the neighbor's yard. But the other question was that they needed a little extra space. They need a little extra space in order to put that second floor bathroom on the house. And so we are asking you if codifying that in some fashion might be an appropriate thing to do, to just simply make the preservation prospect in Lake Bluff a lot more palatable and a lot more fluid. So that's kind of what we're asking and what we're here for. So.
Any questions from the commissioners, or who wants to start?
I'll start. I mean, the big question is really, how to preserve a home, right? There's so many homes that we have in this town that need to be landmarked, but how do we go about that? It's almost like we need to get in front of that issue to allow that. I live in an old home that's one of the original cottages that I don't have any incentive not to tear it down. I won't, but I mean.
What is your address?
611 Prospect.
Oh, okay.
East Prospect.
You're in that neighborhood then, right?
But there's, you know, the opportunity of how do we give that incentive. I think it's great to give the 20%. I think it's a wonderful idea. Again, to really not impact any of the other issues that we have living in such close quarters, you know, the daylight plane, our neighbors, you know, love thy neighbors in all different areas of zoning is why we're here. But I also feel that there's, how do we get in front of the community or the homeowner to whether they're landmarked or the tax freeze, or there's several documents that are out there that I know, you know, Susan Benjamin, among others, have written or done reports on, that it would be nice to have that available through the village resources or website. Maybe there is already, I don't know, but those are the kind of things that could help people, for you to get the people ahead of time before the wrecking ball, before that even is a notion that you know that there's that opportunity there to, you know, understand sort of where you're at in your place and time with each home individually. So that's sort of an idea, but, and I think the village can definitely, you know, help in that regard, in the website or whatever else. But I guess my question is, when you say, well, when the home is landmarked, how do you even go about being recognized? And are you working as a committee to try to get more homes, and it sounds like neighborhoods, to be sort of landmarked in a community, right?
Yes, yes, we're doing a number of things. Thank you for raising a couple of issues. One, information gathering. And so we're gonna let Glenn Cole shine a little bit here. One of the things that we've done is come up with a concept called Choose Lake Bluff. And it's asking the question, why do people choose Lake Bluff? Why did we choose Lake Bluff, past tense, and why do people choose Lake Bluff in the future tense? And one of the things that we've done, with a great deal of Glenn's assistance, is put together a database that reaches into, essentially it's a database coordinator or collaborator, and it reaches into all of the other available databases and brings information into one central spot. You can call up the site, it's on the village site, and you hover your mouse over the house that you're interested in, and it will pop up the data that comes from the county. So all of the county tax records come up. Photograph of the house, maybe an old photograph of the house. The Susan Benjamin information from the History Center is being loaded in or has been loaded into that. And then other information that we sort of gathered along the way. Steve Krause is here tonight. He's the former head of the HPC and done sort of the laboring oar on all of this work. But one of the things that Steve does in his spare time is create the history tour walks for the Lake Bluff History Museum. So the information that he puts together for that part of the history walk, that information is loaded up on there. So it's kind of the fun little website. If you want to go down the rat hole or down the mouse hole, rabbit hole, you can. Have to get my animals correct here.
Not vermin.
Yeah, so you can have a lot of fun saying, well, now what's the story about my neighbor's house, and what about the people behind me and stuff. And so sort of at one source, while you're sitting there at your computer, you can sort of get lost in that and just have a lot of fun of looking at the different parts of that. We're also hoping that that's something that realtors will go to instantly. As soon as they think they're gonna have a listing, they'll say, oh, part of my initial, not my final, but part of my initial due diligence is to go to this website and start pulling up all of the information. So as we do that, we make that information a lot easier to get to. You don't have to go to the History Museum. In COVID time, that required an appointment. You know, you get past all of that sort of stuff. So there's a lot of information that's a lot closer to hand. The HPC has identified sort of the 25 of our most important houses, the ones that we can see that we think these are the ones, these are the gotta save houses. And so we're in the process of formulating a way of contacting those people and encouraging them, explaining what's going on. One of the things that's happening, it's already started to happen, is information about the incentive plans that we're working on, both with finance and with you, have started to come out, and people have said, that's a trigger for me. That causes me to want to step up. And you'll be seeing a house, another house on North Avenue coming to you for a zoning variance on a roof line for the garage. And they only need a small variance on their property. But if we can install these kinds of changes that we're talking about, then they're assured of being able to rehab their house. They want to put a little second room on the top of the garage so they can have an office up there. So they're being the new generation of people that work at home and work on their computers and whatnot. And so that very much becomes part of, saving Lake Bluff and making the streetscape remain the same with small minor adjustments. So did I answer?
Well, it's interesting, though, that maybe I'm going on a tangent here, but it's interesting that you talked about the home on Center that was torn down, but yet built back appropriately, with the new regulations or codes or whatever else. And it's kind of interesting that doesn't happen that often, right? I mean, how can you, encourage a homeowner, because once they buy a place, they could,
In my time.
within variance, they could do basically whatever.
In my time in Lake Bluff, I can think of perhaps 3 houses where they've gone and just literally replaced the house. There's another house at Moffett and Scranton, the red house on the corner next door to Janie. And they built a replacement house simply because they loved the house so much. But the house that had originally been built in the 1890s had floors on such angles, if you dropped a marble on the floor, you never knew where it was going to go. So it was just an old rattletrap of a house. They replaced it with a house. But to your point, that doesn't happen very often. If you live where I live on Woodland, we see ranch after ranch after ranch come down. You take down a 1,500, 1,800 square foot ranch, and I get a 4,400 square foot house next to me. All my sunlight is gone. All my views are gone. The beautiful vista that I thought was going to be part of my lifestyle just disappears. The big double wide lots are disappearing. The lots get snipped in half. You end up with, you take down 2,000 square feet of house, now you've got 8,800 square feet of building going in. So how do we slow that down? Well, can we find a way to preserve the houses and preserve the vistas in Lake Bluff?
Perhaps maybe the incentives would help versus an old home who has low ceilings, a one-car garage, no basement, like I'm getting to a point where I think maybe I should sell or move on, because is that younger X, Y generation gonna appreciate my little cottage, I mean, and perhaps if I had incentives or deemed worthy of a badge of honor, that I didn't tear it down, but I don't have any of that, right? And I'm an old home with all those restrictions, and I'm speaking for a number of homes that, you question how moving forward, of what people want. I mean, I think our location and our town and our branding and our lifestyle is way beyond low roofs and one-car garage, but, that's for me to say, not for someone who hasn't moved into this community yet to really understand the richness of it. So that would be the struggle. Or some of these old homes that have single pane glass, that have this huge burden under, of expense that they have to, to upkeep, so any incentive. Anyway, I'm rambling on. It's a fascinating topic, and you guys have done a great job.
I don't think the millennials,
Right.
and I'm not sure if that's I'm not sure all of the alphabet soup in there, but the younger people, I don't think they're absolutely tied to this concept of the urban sprawl development. I don't think all of them are tied to saying, I gotta have a new house. There's a certain group, there's a certain percentage of those people, but I think there's a lot of other people in that group who say, I don't mind, I think it would be cool to have an old house. I think it would be cool to have an old house with a porch on it, but by the same time, I want to have a nice bathroom, you know? I want to have a bathroom I'm comfortable in. I need to have a kitchen that I can cook in and a serving area for the family. So if you end up putting, I call it a box, but if you end up putting that bump out on the back end of the house so that they can have that, now they're willing to say, I'll take the smaller living room because I've got the porch to go with it. And then I get to be part of the ambiance of the neighborhood. And I think there's an awful lot of people that like that romance and like that vision. And so,
Thank you, Joe.
Well, I certainly appreciate the amount of time and effort put into this. I'm no expert in housing. I think that a 20% floor area ratio, are we making comments or are we just asking questions?
I think you could do both.
Yeah, okay. Is good, but is 20% on a small lot, is that too big? Will it impede other people's privacy? So would it be better to have a ratio of house to build out that still keeps the percentages, maybe not 20%, maybe 10%, based on what the rest of the neighborhood looks like? That was just a thought I had.
So one thing to consider is that, and I'm not advocating that 20% is the right number or that you can't do that, but it is the floor area ratio bonus, but you still have the setback rules and the other bulk requirements in the code. So it's only adjusting that one item.
So you couldn't do it and go past the setback rules, is what you're saying?
Unless you got a variation.
Okay,
yeah.
then I understand that.
Right, and the other piece of the discussion is with the variation is changing, so you have the standards that don't go away, but if you are a landmark, then there's a presumption that you've met the requirements. So I'll give you a good example. Somebody comes in and wants to build that's, on the second floor, a bigger bathroom, and it's gonna cause you to go over bulk requirements. What is your hardship? You could say, well, you bought the house knowing full well what it was, you walked right in, it's not a hardship. Well, it allows them to come in and without having to lay out all the evidence, without having to make the case, it's presumed. So unless somebody rebuts it, unless a neighbor shows up and says, wait a minute, here's all the reasons this shouldn't be granted, it makes it a little easier from a legal perspective to be able to say, I meet these standards.
Right.
And so it's perhaps, it's one of those, at the margins, maybe it helps to make it a little easier to be able to come in with, say, I need relief for that bathroom, for that addition, for the garage, whatever it's going to be. But yeah, going back to that, so these other bulk things would be a variation with the presumption, and it's the 20% on just the FAR.
Yeah, okay. That
Right.
clarifies that.
So,
As far as dropping the hardship, I have no problems with that.
on the FAR piece, it's the piece that we look at also from when we had our open meetings and we had the public come in and speak to us. It also helps them in their perspective of sitting in their house and not having to say, I can't do anything with it. I can only market my house as a tear down. So they start at tear down. They don't even consider that. And there are realtors in town who will assist you in, reinforcing that attitude because they see, the realtor sees a fast turn for them. And so if you say, the village is willing to work with you on this, they're willing to give you a little bit of room to maneuver and stuff, then people will start to think, and sometimes it may take you 2 or 3 years to figure out that you want to remodel your house, you want to make that investment in it and whatnot. And if you know going into that the village will help you with that, then that's a great big leg up on it. You're not going to simply start out, as I say, start out at no. And so that's part of the
I think you've done a very good job.
Thank you, Elliot. Deb?
me unmute. Well, I participated in probably most of the meetings that Steve Kraus led and the committee was involved in and everything as they were getting to a lot of these recommendations. So, and I think a lot of the concerns being talked about were raised in the time, over that time and everything. My thoughts are that the more we can do to incentivize voluntary, incentivize voluntary preservation is great. Um, so the floor area increase without having to go through additional hoops, those kind of things definitely I'm a fan of. The one thing that I was hearing really loud and clear from the homeowners who came who were owners of those properties was that they really don't want to have the punitive stuff. And I guess I'm still unclear on the last page of our packet, page 10 of 10, where we're talking about, some delays to the demolition process and things like that. I'm confused whether we're adding time on to things. Because the one thing that I heard that really struck me was from a couple different people who said, we as owners of these historic properties really feel that we have made a great investment in the village of Lake Bluff. We did it for ourselves because we loved we loved our house and everything, but we've also given to Lake Bluff the advantage of becoming a very, known historic town. And to then put the burden on us to, one gentleman I remember was talking about, the asset of your home is frequently your biggest asset. So he said, what happens if I need to sell this relatively quickly because of a health issue or whatever? He said, I don't want to then feel that I am tied up into a longer, and he said, and maybe the only person who wants to buy this is somebody who's going to demo it. You know, by offering incentives, maybe more people will be there, but by the same token. So anyway, I guess my big question is, are we talking through adding what I consider to be, let's just say, punitive, slowing down the process or something? Because I guess I'm not in favor of that process. So I'm just curious on that piece, I guess.
We're not proposing any changes to the time limits for
Okay,
using a hold. So they'll be the same time limits that are in place and have been in place for however, the last
Okay.
5-10 years, something like that. So,
okay.
and
Okay, and then I guess one question is just the one thing that was also talked about in those meetings was the involuntary designation as landmarks. That still there can still be someone other than the homeowner who proposes a landmark for property.
well, that is one of the tools in the toolkit. Okay, and it's a tool that's in the toolkit of probably 80 or 90% of HPC ordinances across the country. So it's not it's not something that's out of the ordinary. It's not something that's somehow new or whatnot. It's something that's used rarely, and also given the time factors, given the time hold factors for the preservation ordinance in Lake Bluff, the entire length of time that a property can be held after it's been involuntarily landmarked is only about 4 months. So if a house is involuntarily landmarked, then 4 months after that, the statute falls away and they may apply for their demolition permit.
Okay. Okay. Thank
So
you.
there are other jurisdictions on the North Shore, other places where the demolition hold is a year long. And so if you go to a homeowner and say, we're going to involuntarily, your house is so beautiful, your house is such a fabulous building in town, we think it's a landmark that should remain here forever. And because of that, we're gonna involuntarily landmark it, and now we're gonna place a no demolition order on your house. It's one thing to say, think about this for 4 months, as opposed to saying, think about this and try and sell the house for a year. Okay, so there's a different range of the sort of the, you call it a punitive nature to that. I think of it more as an administrative matter, but there's a whole different impact to it than telling someone that you can't tear your house down for a year. So,
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Deb. George?
I have a couple questions. The back for the floor area ratio bonus item of 20%, all the backup material seems to refer to capping it at 500 square feet. Is that part of the proposal moving forward, or did that fall off?
we had talked about we started talking about it in two different directions. I would like to see it as the 20% floor area ratio. There's a possibility of putting a 500 square foot cap on that. I think it depends on, FAR depends on the building and the property. And so it depends on what the house needs and what they want to do with it and stuff. So I think the ratio is more important than having a cap.
Yeah, and that's, I'm asking for clarity as to which one is actually being proposed.
So we would ask just for the ratio without a cap.
And then, and maybe these next two questions are more directed towards the village attorney. The phrase, allow up to a 20% floor area ratio bonus subject to the PCZBA's review. So that phrase, if codified that way, implies to me that it's not really an automatic, you're gonna get the 20% no matter what.
So I
Subject to the PCZBA's review. Is that what is intended?
so I
This is on
I guess
the
the
cover
the
of
question would
Glenn's,
be what is intended, and I'll put that back on the HPC, but it's also, you can do it any way, you can do it either way. You have the option to say it's automatic, you get 20%, and make it purely a staff review where they crunch the numbers and say, yep, here's your building permit. Or you could do it where there's some sort of review process at this body where, in order to get the 20%. So you have freedom.
and just like my first question, I'm asking, as presented to us, the phrase is there, subject to the PCZBA's review. So are we
One of the
Are we
things-
suggesting that the 20% automatically be built into the code, or that?
One of the things that we're working with is homeowners' general fear, their general uncomfortableness with coming upstairs here and standing in front of a group and trying to explain what they're trying to do. And homeowners are very uncomfortable doing that, even when they come up with their architect or a builder, they're very loath to do that. And so if the FAR is granted as a matter of course, it's a pretty simple addition that doesn't have any other zoning questions for you or any other problems, then yeah, we would ask that it become a matter of course. It's subject to the review of someone looking at the drawings to say, oh, well, does this also happen to bump into, whatever other violation might be there, a setback or something like that. But we would like to see it become just a regular grant by, just simply by
Numerical
right.
regulation, that if you're landmarked, you get 20% more regardless.
Up
It
to
was provide-
20%, right?
Provided that,
Provided that, yes, provided that it doesn't.
provided that all the other,
Provided-
It doesn't trigger your side setback or what have you, doesn't trigger an automatic invitation to come see the ZBA, right?
okay. And then I guess the same question I have with the first part of the proposal here, because it ends with the phrase, which presumption may be rebutted. Because on the one hand, if we say they don't have to meet any standards, yeah, boy, that's really good for landmark
Right.
properties. But on the other hand, there is a point where even an owner of a landmark property can get greedy. Homeowners want.
Right. and-
Believe me, as a person that processed plans for 25 years, there's a lot of people that
You have
want,
some experience in
they
that?
want every square foot that they can get, and then some. And
that's-
things like the daylight plane, I just had someone, I've been retired for 6 years, and I just had someone 2 days ago complaining to me as if I was still a staff person that this wall next to my property, it used to be a ranch, and now it's a wall that blocks my sun from the south, just as you've commented, Paul, about
Come down to
the
Woodland
building
Road.
there, and there still needs to be a system of check and balances.
Member Russell has been retired for 6 years, and people still hand me letters he wrote when he was serving as the village engineer on this topic as well.
They all make
They're very
complete sense.
insistent.
So, and I'm sorry, I wanted to finish my point, Ben, before you responded, but I want to make sure that which presumption may be rebutted. To me, that tells me that someone, if they're wanting they have a landmark property and they want a wall that's now going to be 20% higher than the daylight plane allows, whether a neighbor comes in or not, if the majority of the zoning board decides this is too egregious, it blocks too much of the sun, especially if you're on a north-south street, and the wall is going up to the south. I personally think the ZBA still needs to have the ability to do that. So am I interpret, and it seems to me that phrasing which presumption may be rebutted is telling me we can stop it if we don't feel it's appropriate.
That is correct. So think of it this way, is in the balancing test, more likely than not, is kind of the standard. Somebody comes in and they say, I meet these standards, and it's up to the applicant standing at the podium and in the packet materials they provide you to tip the balance in favor of their application for a variation. If they don't do that, you can say, sorry, you did not present enough evidence that you've met these standards. Now, the way this starts is if there's a landmark, they come in and say, we want a setback variation or, daylight plane or whatever it is, it's going to be tipped in their favor. It's presumed, but it doesn't mean, number one, a neighbor can't come in and say, wait a minute, this doesn't meet the intentions of the code, and it has nothing to do with a landmark. They just want a 7-car garage because they have a car collection and they want to do it right up against my property line. Wait a minute, this, don't do this. It also allows this body to solicit evidence. So there's nothing wrong with even if there's no neighbor here, to say to an applicant, hey, applicant, explain this further to me. I have these concerns. And based on the testimony and based on your questions and your thoughts and how you read it, you have the ability to say, I don't think, yes, you're a landmark, but I don't think you meet these standards.
Well,
So you're
but-
able to turn it down if you think it's too extreme.
But isn't this phrase here saying that we're going to codify this statement here that says the landmark property has satisfied all the standards? So how do we?
We're saying
reject-
it's presumed, it's not saying it does. So you can then say, well, we've looked at this and feel that it's, yes, there's a presumption, but we think it's still, based on what you're telling us this evening, does not, the evidence that's now coming out because of my questions and my reading, I don't think you meet it. Now, where it matters is really not, I guess let me be pragmatic. Part of this is really about marketing, being able to go to an applicant, somebody who's thinking about landmarking, who's a little unsure, saying, look, you do this, there are some benefits, and it's to push them over the edge to landmark. And, and it's the sales pitch to say, you get some benefits. You can come in, and it's going to be an easier, road at the PCZBA if you want to do an addition. At the end of the day, you always really have the power to turn down an application, and they still have to go through the standards. It's presented, but you do have freedom to say no. And I guess in the off chance, the 1 out of 100 cases, or the 2 out of 100 cases, when you have a fiery neighbor who could theoretically challenge you. It helps that landmark homeowner because, you know, if they ever had to go to court at the end, they get the variation and then they get sued by their neighbor saying, court, stop this. This is going to block my view. This is horrible. It allows that homeowner to say to a judge, look, I'm a landmark. It's presumed. And so, again, if you're unsure, judge, of whether it should be granted, it's in my favor. You know, so yes, did I block the view to the lake? Did I block the sun? Is it, you know, closer to their lot line? Yeah, a little, but that doesn't mean that the variation was granted improperly, and so it makes it harder for the judge to overturn it. And again, I think we're talking about only if, you know, 1 out of 100, 2 out of 100. I mean, we're not, when's the last time we had a variation that was granted and that was challenged? But it does, you know, and if you don't like the word presumption, and if you think that we should recast that word or explain it more what it means, we can certainly do that if that's the desire of this body. And I don't mind trying to come up with some ideas if you think we should say something else to address this point.
No, I think you've clarified it for me, and whether
Okay.
the word is presumption or something else probably is irrelevant, as long as the other august members of your firm, when they're sitting in your chair, agree with your interpretation of the statement right here.
Let me add another review piece to that, because not only does your group review the house, but our group reviews the house. And we have a whole set of standards on how you review alterations to a landmark. And we have a set of guidelines for it, and it says one of them is compatibility with the neighbors. Okay, so if they come to us and they say, we want to landmark the house, and oh, by the way, we want to put this big honking addition on there, it's within our purview. After it's been landmarked, we then go into a special review of the requested changes, and we go in to see, are those changes architecturally appropriate? And then are they also stylistically appropriate? So is that 7-car garage gonna, you know, overshadow the neighbor's property? Well, our question is a 7-car garage appropriate for the piece of property to begin with? I mean, is it a Victorian style garage? Is it a Georgian colonial style garage? So we're gonna ask some questions like that. And some of those questions will take down the real big over bulk kinds of questions of somebody wanting to build the 20-foot tall structure or something like that. So we have a bit of a vested interest in making sure that alteration that stays within the character of the neighborhood. And part of that is making sure the neighbors are happy in some fashion.
Your judgment is advisory, though, correct? For a procedure?
Yes.
Yep, okay. Overall, I'm in favor of the goals. I always look at it, and maybe it's just because of what I had to do for a living. I'm always looking on the guard for changing regulations that then give people a way out. And something gets out of control. Granted, we can adopt new regulations and stop it if it gets out of control. I am a little worried on the larger lots about a 20% floor area on the bigger lots to give someone a 2,000 extra square feet when they can already have 8,000. I'm not very sympathetic with that. And I do understand a lot of these smaller properties that potentially can be landmarked are on these very tiny lots that probably only allow 2,000 or less square feet to begin with, and I'm much more in favor of allowing the 20% for those lots. I don't know where the cutoff is, but I'm just thinking out loud here. So that's all I have.
But the way I read it, it's not a guarantee. It's just up to. So if it exceeds or it's too big or whatever.
No, what's being proposed earlier, I heard you want to change the rule, 20% flat. Correct?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I thought I heard.
So, that's part of the decision-making
For
process.
that particular
but,
one,
yeah.
not item A,
So,
but item B.
we haven't, I don't know that we have seen any 8,000 square foot houses come before us for landmarking.
1010 Green Bay.
I'm sorry?
There's one on your list. Well, there's actually a couple on your list, but that's okay.
The one on Center, down by the lake.
Center 700 that's only 6,600.
Okay, so that's 6,600. That's, to my
And
way of thinking,
they're-
that's an enormous
They're
house.
allowed another 13,
Yeah,
1,300 square feet. And
Okay.
I'm just wondering where that number should be capped.
okay.
I mean, a lot of our rules, the floor area rule to begin with starts tapering off after 9,000 square feet, so, of lot, so. Anyway, thinking out loud, that's all. I'm done.
Okay.
Thank you, George. Ann?
Well, the benefit of being last to be called on is that, that you all have raised the questions that I had in front of me. So thank you, George and Elliot and Deb, because thank you, Jill. Who brought up something I wasn't thinking about. So I really don't have any other questions. I think I was nervous too about the 20%. I think it's important that I very much appreciate hearing your perspective because it has shifted mine. That said, it's also important to have some other levers there to reassure neighbors that this is not some kind of free-for-all.
That's not a giveaway, right?
Right.
Okay. Well, the HPC reviews the project also, so this is a situation where the project actually gets it gets reviewed twice. And so, maybe grinding through two different commissions will slow down some of the overreach, so.
We are very frightening people. Thank you for all the work that you've been putting into this, too.
Well, good. Well, thank you. Thank you for all your questions. So,
How do we approach it from a next steps perspective? I think the comments that George and others have made regarding that possible sliding scale, if that makes sense to the commission, we'd have to do a little bit of drafting to figure out where you start sliding down below 20%. I'm not sure offhand, but
okay.
is the commission agreeable to that, Paul?
Well, we would, we would like you to make changes to your ZBA code, which would be great. If you want to, if you feel it necessary to put that kind of language in, that's fine. We'll be happy with that. If we can reach out and offer up some form of an FAR variation, we'd be very pleased to have that in our toolkit. We're looking for all the tools we can get to encourage people to preserve their homes. And so the flat 20% would be wonderful. If you're uncomfortable with that, we understand. So I'd sort of bounce it back to you at this point.
What do you think, Glenn or Ben, as far as next steps?
Yeah, so I think process-wise, advantageously, one half of these you're set to take up here in just a few minutes. So that'll be addressed very expediently, perhaps never so expediently in this body's history. Mere minutes. As far as floor area ratio bonus, what we're looking for is a bit of direction, I would say. One part is, there's other floor area ratio questions that this body has raised. And there's, you may want to direct us to look at those items altogether. Alternatively, there is some time sensitivity here. I mean, this is a blocking issue for the HPC before they can do other items on the workflow, so you may want to take that, let's say, out of order. I would also say too, when this comes to you, I think we would bring some analysis on the village's existing landmarks. Perhaps we'd also bring some exhibits in the abstract, but one of the interesting things about this is this could be applied prospectively, and we're looking for a bit of guidance on how prospective you'd like to be. I mean, we could run the same analysis for The HPC's list of extra 25 properties, the list of significant properties in the village goes into the hundreds. I mean, the work multiplies itself out quickly, and that also determines how quickly we can bring this item to you. And page 6 is an example of the type of work we'd be looking to do.
Would it be advantageous to base the FAR bonus on the size of the lot to begin with? So an in village lot that's small would get 20%, and then prorated down based on the size of the lot going forward?
The floor area ratio rule, to some extent, does that already. You could choose to accentuate that, right? So on the smallest lots, you get 40%, and then after that, it's like your income taxes, right? It steps down as you go. I'm sure, taxes and zoning, what else is more interesting?
It says up to 20%. I'm not sure what a 40% is.
Well, what you're what you're multiplying it by, right? So your base floor area, it's 40% for the first chunk, then 30, then 20. So some of that's built in, what you're multiplying times. You could choose to roll that off a little more too if you wanted to. If you wanted to give an even bigger bonus to smaller lots, or depending on how you think about it, an even smaller bonus to bigger lots, right?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Maybe it should be prorated based on the size of the lot. And, the smaller lots are gonna be definitely restricted because of sidelines and back lines and so forth. There's only a certain amount they're gonna be able to add on anyway without a variance. So I think the smaller lots, I think, are easy. You can, I would say, go as far as you can that's legal, based on our zoning guidelines, but 20% or whatever the number is. But on George's example of the house that size, but that's probably on a bigger lot, so maybe they can get away with a larger amount of, or a larger percentage. So I think it's a little bit more complicated than what we've brought up here for some,
Generally speaking, most lots of that size in the village are nowhere near what they could build. It's not too effective of an incentive for them either.
Right. But I really think the smaller lots is really where we should be focusing on. Somebody with the house on, the biggest house there, they're not gonna, if they want some more room, they can have it, and they probably have the space to do it without breaking any rules, I would assume.
If we went with the cap that was discussed earlier of 500 square feet, would that be a little too punitive, Paul?
Well, 500 square feet on some of the smaller houses adds a bathroom. And what we're seeing is people are asking for a bathroom addition or something like that. I'm looking at the list on page 6. The second one from the bottom is 1010 Green Bay, and it's got 359,000 square feet of lot area. So how big an addition are they going to come in and ask for by right? To say, oh, I need an extra freebie of 2,000 square feet by right. They've probably got that anyway on just the amount of land they own. I mean, if we get to a point where some of the houses on here, they already have enough land that if they want to add on 2,000 or 3,000 square feet a house, they can probably do that just by applying for it.
Well, if they're allowed by right, they wouldn't even come to us, but
Right.
my point, once again, is for the
And
people that are greedy. The regs say they can have 9,000 square feet of home, and we just throw this 20% bonus on, and they're automatically allowed to have 11,000 square feet. And I don't know that, I haven't contemplated those bigger properties, and I'm assuming, just based on your list, I can tell that your organization typically, your board typically deals with the smaller, older properties.
We
not
want to
the-
landmark everything done on Prospect, that's the heart of the old village of what we think is really cool in town
Right.
and stuff. And so, I mean, I think it's an interesting question, but I don't know that it has a great deal of applicability for houses, the bigger houses on bigger lots. So, without sitting down with Glenn and doing a bunch of analysis on what's out there and what's available, I don't know what we can do.
Deb's got a comment.
Yep.
Yeah, off the top of my head, I guess I would probably not be in favor of just an arbitrary cap. You know, I'm not sure that would because 500 square feet, for instance, is a 5 by 10 area. So just to cap it at that across the board would be challenging, I think.
50 by 10, Deb, not,
Sorry, you're right. I'm on drugs.
Yeah, but then, so, yeah. But in the scheme of if you have an 8,000 square foot house, that's, you know, that's,
I agree with you, but
it's a ratio thing. It just, you know, you can, the ratio can keep getting away from you back and forth.
if we adopt a flat 20% increase, I'm gonna write you a letter when the plan comes through Mike Crook's desk. Oh, here, it happened.
I told you so.
You can deal with the neighbors.
Right. Well, we will end up dealing with that on the HPC side of it too, to say, is it compatible? And is it too large for the lot? And so if we turn it down, then they have to appeal to the village board. And so it becomes a much larger question at that point.
I would clarify, they would not have to appeal to the village board. So after 35 or potentially 65 days, they could choose to proceed regardless, yeah.
One other thought is, what if we did the 20% floor area ratio on lots of X square feet or X feet going down? Make it allowable and anything. 'Cause then they're, as we said, they're allowed by right to build whatever they want on the larger lots. But if we say a lot of 40,000, I don't know, I'm not good with numbers, but if we say that a lot's up to a certain amount of square footage, they're allowed up to 20%. It's a given.
You want to put that at George's 8,000 square foot cap?
And leave his 8,000 square foot cap off, you know, but I'm just saying, just narrow the allowable square footage and put that in writing. Because you're really talking about, you know, the houses in the East Village, more or less. And that way you'll circumvent any large mansions coming before you saying they need such and such a thing. Then it just comes before us if it's out of the zoning.
Right.
Ben, are you familiar with any ordinances that have a sliding scale on this type of issue, or?
I don't know that I'm familiar with them, but I mean, you certainly, it's within your purview if you think that's appropriate. You can draft this really any way you want. So if you want a sliding scale, if you want to cap, whatever it is, that's just, it's really just a policy decision of what you want.
It's all George's fault. He brought up the subject.
Perhaps the recommendation should be to come up with a draft ordinance that does have that sliding scale and see if we can work with that still provides the benefit to the majority of homeowners, but does protect the one or two or three that could be out there.
If we understand the direction, it sounds like, I'm not sure if we'll have it ready for you in December, as we'll talk about. We have some other casework coming up, but probably in January or before then, we'll move with speed to give you a draft and some analysis to start looking at and working with. And we'll do that separate from these other items at best speed.
Does that work for the commission?
Well, it's your choice, so, if you want to proceed in that way, that's fine. I'm not so sure that it's an applicable distinction. I'm not sure that once you get into the larger size houses and larger size properties that this becomes that much of a true issue, so.
Well, I think the consensus, or at least partial consensus, Paul, is that we're a little bit concerned about that potential aberration, and we don't want to get burned.
I
As a
understand.
community, you know, but we also want to keep the momentum, and so if we can come up with a draft for January.
That's
and then
fine.
to see where we're going. You know, I know it's very, very critical to the commission. I think we can move rather expeditiously and come up with a draft that's agreeable to all.
Okay, that's fine. So, will you be,
Back anyway, doesn't it?
To
Or is it
implement
already-
this?
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's-
it's you're coming, you have to come back anyway. This is a
So-
workshop, it's not a public hearing.
I know, it's not a public hearing, so,
So you're gonna be,
okay. Are
and then
you-
if your group wants to noodle on it and look at your list and decide where the cutoff
Okay,
could be,
that's a good point.
staff would love that.
Okay. All right. Are you gonna be looking at the zoning flexibility piece tonight at your meeting starting in 2 minutes, or do you wanna put the all of this over to another meeting
Yeah, so that first piece is on the agenda for action right after this.
tonight?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes, we
Okay.
might be able to come up with a recommendation on that later tonight. Any
Okay.
other questions or comments, Paul?
No, I want to thank you for all your questions and your interest in all of this and your willingness to entertain this. We want people to choose Lake Bluff, and we think this is one of the ways to do that.
No, we appreciate the presentations, and I think there's a general consensus among us. We just want to come up with a few guardrails, perhaps.
Okay.
So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have a little bit of procedure here.
So I guess the first question, do you want to take a quick break before we start the other meeting?
I'm ready to go.
Okay. So just procedurally, the way to do this, because we just had a special joint meeting, is a motion, just ayes and nays, but to adjourn the special joint meeting, and then we'll call to order the regular meeting.
Great.
Okay.
Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion to what he just said.
Second.
There's a second?
Okay.
Roll call, or?
You can just do voice vote.
Okay.
And I guess, because they made a motion up here for the PCZBA, there should be a motion, also, we can do it at the same time, but a motion from your body to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
Okay,
Aye.
All right.
okay.
Aye.
Adjourned, the special meeting.
Special meeting. Yeah. Thank you very much.